What's it like to overland through one of the largest open spaces in the United States with your friends, one of the most remote and diverse spaces with incredible light and sunsets and the darkest skies in the United States, and dust and water and hot springs and really hot springs and geysers and geology of all kinds of petrified trees and animals, wild horses, immigrant artifacts along the longest intact segment of the historic immigrant trails, 175 remote miles of them through canyons and water crossings and open spaces and challenges that just the sheer insanity of this place might help you find love or religion or joy or art or architecture, delight or dance, and it just might change you forever. Thank you for coming back to my channel and watching this video. I'm very excited today to share about some travels I did back in 2020, traveling through the largest open expanse space in the continental United States, the Black Rock High Rock Conservation Area, and also overlanding on the Applegate Immigrant Trail, the largest or longest segment of immigrant trail available or remaining left in that area. And this was all done in my Sprinter van. I'm really excited to share more about the travels and so forth in this area. It's an area that's been talked about a lot, but I'm going to go into some more details and share about different parts of the area that are so much more expansive and interesting than I think a lot of people have either explored or not shared about. So thank you again for joining today, and I'm looking forward to sharing more. So the Black Rock area is quite famous and well known, and it's roughly about an hour northeast of Reno. And so the drive takes us out towards Winnemucca, where we actually started the Immigrant Trail from around Imlay or Rye Patch area. I'm going to get a little more in that area soon, but before I do, let me talk a little more about the Black Rock area that has been so traveled in, but yet so many areas are often not explored by others. One of the reasons why so many people do explore the Black Rock High Rock areas because it is very easily traveled through by motorized vehicles, and there's lots of great information out there. And you can certainly stop at the Pyramid Lake Reservation as you're traveling through that area to pick up information and meet with them to learn more about the area. And certainly also when passing through Gerlach, meet at the Friends of the Black Rock High Rock building and meet with them there, as they can provide an immense amount of information about traveling through this area to do so safely, as well as places to explore and all the different things that you can do in this area. While many people see the Black Rock as just a dry old lake bed, it's not. It has so much more going on to it with the animals and the plants that are in this area and all the amazing geography. So get a map and explore. As the Black Rock Desert High Rock Canyon Immigrant Trails National Conservation Area is part of the BLM's National Landscape Conservation System, it's 1.2 million acres of high desert, mountain ranges, volcanic tablelands, and the Black Rock Desert Playa itself. It's also the largest conservation area in the continental United States. It protects a ton of historic and natural wonders. It has seasonal closures. It has all kinds of wildlife and sensitive plants and landscapes, so definitely do stay on the roads. So get a map and certainly explore this area and make sure that when you are traveling through here to leave historical artifacts and findings as you found them. And do realize too that pack everything you need in and out, including firewood and water. It is a very harsh landscape. It can have extreme weather patterns, and so be prepared. When traveling from Reno up to the Black Rock, one of the nice areas you pass through is actually the Pyramid Lake Reservation with descendants from the Great Basin Paiute people. It's the first national scenic byway entirely on an Indian reservation. Pyramid Lake's roughly about 125 miles of shoreline. It's fed from Lake Tahoe's only outlet, the Truckee River, and it itself has no outlet, and it's part of the prehistoric Great Lake Lahontan that covered most of northwestern Nevada thousands of years ago. And it's also just got some beautiful colors. So certainly stop and enjoy it as you're traveling through this area. And as most people do, when you arrive to the Playa, you open your doors, breathe in that fresh air, look at these big, amazing expanse of sky and landscape, and just really enjoy the area. The skies are wonderful, both at night and daytime. It's one of the darkest areas in the entire continental United States, and there's just so much diversity of life there to go and explore, and you can really do it in almost any vehicle. Be sure you do have shade structures, because there is very little shade out there, and obviously the weather can turn, so be prepared, and you can certainly camp in any method you want. And while camping out there, you'll be really mesmerized probably by the sky, by the sunrises, the sunsets, these long landscapes, and the open spaces that you can really explore and enjoy with friends and camp out and just have a great time. My many trips out to the Black Rock area, I continue to meet people that know this area incredibly well and have been traveling out there for many decades and know it well. And so do certainly open your door, bring some food and beverage to share, and be ready to listen to some amazing stories of the history and the spaces. And then certainly when you're ready to go and start exploring, the main way people do explore is by driving across the playa itself. And driving across the playa is a lot of fun, no doubt about it. There's been land speed records that have been set out there. You can go really fast. You can cover a big area. I think it's roughly about 60 miles long in one direction. And there's, believe 7 sub-playas that are all interconnected. So you can cover some big distance in that. But really, the great areas are when you start actually getting up along all the various different mountain ranges on the edges and the fringes, and you get out of your vehicle and you actually start hiking and exploring, because there's some just amazing, beautiful landscapes and areas that are so great to see. And also when you get further away from the playa, there's just some amazing areas to go and explore in this massive landscape with some really interesting landscapes and geography that are just so different than what most people do see when they're out there. And of course, the most common way people do travel out in this area is by going to Burning Man. And the Burning Man Festival is an amazing festival. It's a massive city of over 60,000 people that come together to share art. And you can do all kinds of things to read. And you can get together and you can fall in love. You can certainly create joy and have amazing experiences. You can certainly go and pray in this area. People get married here in chapels. And you go and, of course, can see and express art of all different kinds and amazing architectures, and see these amazing sunrises and sunsets that are across the playa. And then certainly as it turns to night, all this amazing art and people and experiences are out there, just starts coming alive. And of course, that means everything from fires to light shows, which that kind of activity can happen all year round out here in the Black Rock Desert, which can make for a really fun time any time of year. And of course, that means people also want to start dancing and playing music in this beautiful big open landscape, and just cherish the amazing scenes and sights that are out here. So do that, enjoy it. And really, there's this insanity to both the playa and the Black Rock area, and its size, its immensity, and the landscape and the weather that's out there, and how it changes day to night, night to day. And of course, the artwork that's out there during Burning Man and throughout that whole festival, and all the different activities that happen during it. But even the art that still continues to stay out there in many different ways. And so as you explore, you see more of that. And certainly the main way to explore during Burning Man is by bike. And it's still a fantastic way, if not the best way, to travel across the playa and really explore it and see it and be able to go down little trails on the edges of the playa. And of course, there are many bikes and different ways to do that during Burning Man. And of course, all the amazing cars, and whether these are overlanding vehicles or art vehicles, they are just remarkable. And of course, both during the day and the night as you come out. And sometimes they don't even have to be cars. They're planes. People do fly out there and they skydive into the area. And, one thing that is certain is when you are traveling across the playa, really have good tires and big tires. And before you even get to the playa, after going north from Gerlach, stop at Goober Lane and see the amazing art that's there, and really understand that probably as you read this art, that your life will be changed, and you won't even necessarily know exactly where you're going to go. You just know that your destination is probably unknown, and it will come to you as you're traveling in this amazing landscape. And as you travel through and across this amazing landscape, you'll see not only artwork that's both natural and man-made, but also wild horses and burros roaming across this landscape in different playas and mountain ranges, and the colors of them and how they change with the changing light conditions. And of course, also they change throughout the year. And sometimes you can also go and explore some of these pieces of art that are out there and really kind of see the amazing light from within. But also you can look across this amazing landscape and just really enjoy the wild horses and the light as it changes and reflects, and the water and so forth that's in this area. And there is, even though it's high desert, there is an immense amount of water that's out here, and not just water, but hot springs, and lots of hot springs. I believe I've been told that there are hundreds of hot springs that are out here, and not just hot springs, but even geysers. That's right, geysers. And geysers, not just geysers, but colorful geysers. Geysers that spray water dozens of feet into the air and are full of all kinds of iridescent and illuminating colors, just blow your mind. And then of course juxtaposed against these amazing geysers and this natural landscape of hot springs and so forth is of course also the dry areas and the mountain ranges. But there's also these wet areas and these hot springs that can be really beautiful to travel through and also be able to even enjoy. But do be careful. These hot springs, some of them can be incredibly hot, too hot to be able to go into, and so enjoy the area around them, but do not go into them unless you absolutely do check the temperature and know that it's safe for you to go into them. In addition to the hot springs that certainly can be too hot to enjoy, there's also in some areas old ordinances from the military training that happened here back during World War II, and some are even unexploded, and so do be careful of those. And also be very careful and enjoy the natural animals that are in this area. Some can be very sensitive, including also their habitats. And of course, the artifacts that still do remain in this area from the immigrants that had traveled through these areas and along the Emigrant Trail that I'm going to talk about here shortly, and the areas that they watered their horses and camped at, which I'm going to talk about, and that we also did enjoy while we're on this journey. And also let me remind you again too that this is definitely an overlanding trip where you must be fully self-reliant, have all your own food and water. There is no cell service along this 175 miles of Immigrant Trail. It can be very dry. So be prepared with all the food, water, people, additional vehicles, and good tires to travel through this area safely. So our group tried to go ahead and travel the entire 175 miles of the Applegate Emigrant Trail, the longest contiguous segment of the historic immigrant trails in the United States. And we were fortunate enough to have friends of the Black Rock along with us as this entire area was traveling through the Black Rock Canyon. And we had quite a bevy of different vehicles that were well equipped and capable for this journey. All were full drive, all had good tires, and each vehicle also had communication so we can communicate with each other. We also had good maps because out here there really are no directions from GPS. We did also follow the actual signs that have been putting up in the past by the Immigrant Trails Association, which is really fascinating for them to put up and us to follow it. The beginning of this journey, it certainly could start out pretty dusty from Imlay and the Sulphur Springs area, heading west across some of the upper sections of the Playa, which is a really fascinating area, but yes, no doubt about it, it was very dusty, and it makes for a little bit of a rough start with all this accumulation of dust that happens on the way. From Rye Patch Reservoir to Sulphur is about 55 miles, and then from Sulphur to Black Rock Point's another 18 miles. With a little bit of an extra few miles to go head out to Double Hot Springs. From Black Rock Point up to Soldiers Meadows is another 35 miles, and certainly there's obviously some time to enjoy there at Black Rock Point in those springs before heading up there. But up at Soldiers Meadows, we did enjoy also a nice lunch spot up there. But before getting up there, you go along the Calico Mountains, which are very colorful and beautiful, and it's a lot of fun to explore some of the areas up along there. Before heading out from Soldiers Meadows, which is really where the real journey starts to become very interesting. And the reason why is because the journey from Soldiers Meadows to Massacre Ranch, which is about 40 miles, is really where the trail starts to become more rugged and does definitely require four-wheel drive. And we go through some water crossings, whereas previous to this, it was mostly just some dry, rougher, graded roads. And so we had some water crossings to go through. We have some little bit of a climbs to go through, some very interesting geological features along the way, and some real challenging spots where you have to wonder how the immigrants actually made it through these sections. And once we get through the Fly Canyon area, it really starts becoming very remote, and you feel like you're very much just in the middle of nowhere out there as we start approaching the entrance to the High Rock Canyon and Little High Rock Canyon, which are really just geologically beautiful, and you certainly keep your eye peeled for the bighorn sheep and the various, and sometimes even horses and things that do reside out there. And in this section, you'll definitely appreciate, make sure you have plenty of fuel to make it through this entire trip. This 175 miles of very remote backcountry with nothing else around. But it's as you travel through High Rock Canyon, you have a lot of appreciation for the immigrants and their travels that they made through this area. As we travel through some very rugged off-road sections, some deeper water sections as well in the canyon, and also found some really fascinating artifacts and also remnants of notes that were left in certainly different places along the way here to leave their communications from one immigrant to another immigrant party as they traveled through this area. And before we completely exited out of the High Rock Canyon, we certainly had some challenges that we had to do some self-recovery to make sure we could get out of some areas as the roads get a little bit narrow and slippery in there before we eventually made it to what's called the garage, where there's some really neat artifacts that are in this area that can certainly be found, and make sure, of course, to do leave them there for others to also enjoy them. It's a good time to also, of course, check your own vehicle fluids and condition. And then at night, really, we enjoyed a nice camp together and dinner together, and even some night bocce ball in this incredibly dark area where you cannot see anything by your natural eyesight without some additional light around, which is really just so much fun to enjoy. Before we departed on the third day to Stevens Camp, we made sure we checked in with each other and checked out all of our gear and equipment out, make sure we're okay. And there were some pretty rugged sections of trail that we drove on up through up to Stevens Camp that were very slow going and did require some directions from each other. I don't have any good photos of that, but you can see here from some of the open areas as we finally get through that canyon, the rocky sections up towards Stevens Camp, it opens up, and it's a really lovely area, and it's a little bit of a relief as we start going up Stevens Camp with just a couple more little water crossings before we do get our way up there. And ultimately up at Stevens Camp, there's quite a few artifacts up there for people to see and kind of have some remnants from this area, which is very nice, and to learn a little more about the history of this area. And as we approach the end of the actual Emigrant Trail, one thing to make sure to point out is have good recovery gear, spare tires, good tires, recovery points front and rear on each vehicle, and certainly whatever other personal gear you need to camp out, and the water that you need, and of course the fuel to be able to travel roughly 200 miles off-road and also somewhat in low range as well. Now, while just about any decent four-wheel drive with good clearance and good tires should be able to do this trail, as you can see here from our collection of vehicles that we had on this trip, we did go ahead and split up after Stevens Camp. Some folks took the shorter way up to Via to get back to the highway to head back into Reno, going down 395 south. And a couple of us instead took an alternate route, which was basically all on dirt out to Highway 34, which is really just a big gravel road. And this was really quite enjoyable to travel on these gravel roads, which was just still this massive, expansive area that really just kind of blows away your mind as to how far you can see, and just going over essentially mountain range or foothill after foothill before you finally get out to the main gravel highway. And then going out along that main gravel highway, we're able to see quite a few herds of wild horses out there, and it is always very enjoyable. And also we stopped at the petrified forest, or some of the remnants of the redwood petrified forest that is out that way as well, before really heading back into the valley that where there's a lot of grazing before getting into back onto the Black Rock Playa. And we decided at 12 Mile Point to go ahead and connect back into the Playa, to bypass the highway back into Gerlach, and instead be able to take the Playa back into towards Gerlach to save a little bit of time and enjoy the distance traveling across there. One thing to note, this is a good area to also really have some good off-road lights when traveling through areas like this, especially as you hit the dusk, to make sure you can be seen. You can also see others and see any dips or rocks or things like that that could be out in the playa there. It's definitely a really good use for any kind of auxiliary lighting that you may have. And we really enjoyed the setting sun and the dusk light that we were driving into, and of course the setting moonlight. And so this was overall an incredibly enjoyable 3-day trip that was about 200 miles of pretty rugged off-road terrain that's, like I said, passable and doable for just about almost any vehicle, but certainly we enjoyed it quite a bit. and arrived back very dusty. Dusty vehicles, and yet had learned a lot about this area and its wildlife and its different plant life and history and the geology and also the history of the immigrants that traveled through this area throughout the 1800s on their way to Oregon and California and other parts of the western United States. So certainly recommend this as an overlanding trip, and certainly recommend overall the whole Black Rock Conservation Area, and it's over 1 million acres of exploration. Make sure to do it responsibly. Do check in with friends at a Black Rock or also the Pyramid Lake Reservation or other areas that you're traveling through, or at the BLM. Make sure you're following their tread lightly ethics. And like I said, leave artifacts where you found them and as you found them, and certainly do just enjoy the wildlife and the natural scenery areas here. And if you do come into this area, make sure you are, like I said, fully prepared to be completely self-sufficient, self-reliant, to travel through this rugged area without any sort of ability to have support other than from your own team as you travel through. But it makes for a great experience. It's probably one of the best overlanding areas and experiences that one can have in probably the entire United States. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this. Please do certainly share this with others and subscribe, and I look forward to sharing more with you shortly.